Hi, and welcome back to New Rome, the show where we discuss the fall of Western civilization, and we talk about the many ways that humanity is killing itself this week. This is Galahad, this is Percival, I'm Arthur, welcome to the round table. Let's discuss. Hey, and we're back. Hey, thank you again for joining us on our weekly Friday forum. This subject, this week, is going to be one that's near and dear to all of our hearts. It's going to be cultural relativism. And we thought it would be just a joy to discuss here with Galahad and Percival and myself. So, gentlemen, let's begin these meetings, as we always do, with food and drink. And for those of you following us at home, we are enjoying a crisp mountain water this week. It's delicious. And of course, the only proper way to serve delicious, high-quality water is in a goblet as such. There you are. I will go ahead and pour you. Thank you.
You are the host?
I am indeed the host, but you are also a ferocious individual who generally likes to help himself.
Oh.
Thank
But I
you.
could not. As we are here to entertain our guests and to teach them etiquette.
I'm sure you also appreciate having the drink of this week being no calorie.
That I do. Do not mind if I take a small piece.
Not at all. We have an aged cheddar this time, paired with a dark chocolate raspberry ganache bar. And it is absolutely divine. There's the second one. And of course, you at home, you're always more than willing to, or more than welcome, to skip past this part in the video where we eat and just skip straight to the discussion. But, as for us currently living here in the present, how are we doing this week? Anything new to report?
I haven't been lynched yet, so that's fine.
Okay.
Ah.
I mean, this is a week later. It's not like we're filming in batches or anything.
Not at all.
It would be facetious to even suggest such a thing.
Of course not, we look different.
Oh, yeah. We look entirely different. Our plates are definitely not still peppered from the run of the previous cheese.
Yeah, definitely. It's not like I have the same hairstyle as the week before without any growth.
Exactly.
Yes.
I absolutely adore this chocolate, though. The raspberry really works. I love this particular, so, you guys know, I'm not a huge fan of the environmental movement. In fact, I, more often than not, believe that nature is for the sole benefit of mankind and was, and doesn't really serve any other purpose. But one of the things that I really do enjoy that has come out of the environmental movement recently are all of these very high-quality, handcrafted treats that you can get at, stores like Smith's and Walmart. Like this particular bar, for instance, is the Endangered Species bar that you see gallivanting around your Smith's. Or for those of you joining us in more rugged parts of the United States, Publix. I've only been inside of a Publix once, and I was in Florida, so naturally it was an unpleasant experience. They put the eggs in the front.
Oh my.
What savage would do that?
Hey, we're in the front. I'm not even kidding.
But that is savagery. That is like a sin in my opinion.
So the chocolate is delicious. What is everyone's opinion on the chocolate?
I taste more cranberry than I do raspberry, which is
Really?
strange. Yeah.
It could be that they were cutting it with cheaper berries.
They could have been.
It's a bit more
It's
sour.
definitely.
Sour, tart.
It's definitely been seeded.
That's definitely true.
Which is very strange. I am guessing they're trying sustainability as well, so
Right.
it would make sense.
Dang hippies.
What about the cheese? How are we doing on the aged cheddar? I believe this cheddar said that it had been aged for 9 months on the box.
Good. Very.
You can definitely tell this cheddar has been aged way longer than the other cheese.
Nutty. Very nutty.
It does give you those nutty undertones, doesn't it? See, I adore that.
Yep.
I'm always looking to strike the perfect balance between a cheese that is creamy and decadent, but also one that gives you that subtle, nutty taste that you get from cheese, aging.
I would suggest raw sheep's milk.
Really? You know I love goat and sheep milk.
Raw sheep's milk cheese.
How about camembert?
It's okay.
That's alright. You gotta remember Nick.
I'm a fan of Manchego, more or less. So.
What's the name of that one that comes in the black package that has the crocodile on it?
I believe you're talking about Lacoste, and that's a clothing brand.
That is absolutely not what I was discussing. I was at Sprouts the other day, and I swear to you, I picked up a delicious aged cheese. It had been aged, it said on the thing 18 months. And it was absolutely fantastic. It was black, it had a red circle, and a crocodile in the front. I'm not sure whether it was a crocodile or an alligator. It was at an angle, so I wasn't able to see if the snout was more pointed or more round. So, you know, it'd be impossible for me to tell.
This cheese is imported, is it not?
I believe it is, yes.
Hopefully from a nice civilized area, not like an area
Oh,
that
I'd assume it's from Spain.
Oh, so an area that's famously known as kicking out as many migrants as possible.
You know,
who brings their unfilthy...
did you guys hear about the coup?
But joking aside.
The coup?
What coup?
Coup, yes.
The coup in Spain. So overnight, Spain's government was completely replaced from a center-right leaning government.
They call it center-right. It's still left-wing in the U.S., and they were replaced with socialists.
Mm-hmm. It was absolutely horrible.
We need Franco back. I want my Franco.
You want Franco? I don't know. Franco wasn't... I mean...
He got rid of those nosy Marxists and taught them a valuable lesson of reality.
Right, but then he just replaced it with a different version of socialism.
At least it was good and Catholic.
Of course, for those of you paying attention with us at home, that fascism is a form of socialism.
Oh yeah,
yes.
It is a form of socialism.
And is instead just, motivated on the basis of national identity rather than class identity.
Exactly.
Oh, no, it was motivated primarily by the goal to get around the problem with centering power in individuals.
Because you have fascism's founder, Gentile.
Gentile.
And then, Giovanni Gentile.
If you guys want to look them up.
Then we have Benito Mussolini that actually calls it to it.
Right, but then the difference... Because
it was ghost-written. So Gentile was writing with Mussolini during this ghostwriting. And he was one of those Hegelian socialists.
It's actually quite interesting about how fascism reaches out as any other form of socialism. We have the Nazis, we have the Benitos, and we have the Phalangists, wherever the Spanish fascists are. One deals with extremely Catholic national identity, the Spaniards. Mm-hmm. The other one tries to make Rome great again and fails multiple times.
Yeah, but doesn't Mussolini besieges the Catholic Church at least 3 separate times.
Yeah. Yep.
Before finally getting the Catholic Church to just go, hey, we'll just be here, and we'll acknowledge your existence, but only if you leave us alone.
And of course we have the Nazis, which decided to follow the
1,000-year Reich. 1,000-year Reich.
Thank God they defeated.
The scary thing is that it's like Hitler is a classic example of getting in your own way. Hitler is probably the greatest single example in all of history of what happens when you are your own worst enemy. How much better would it have gone if? I guess that's a discussion for another time. We're not discussing alternate history on this particular...
You know what? On this episode of Alternate History, trademark, sorry, Cody.
Right? Today on the History Channel, were aliens responsible for the Declaration of Independence?
I say yes. You see aliens.
Doesn't Newt Gingrich run his own alternate history critical thinking show?
Yeah.
But going back to the viewpoint...
Nice guy. He's looking to colonize the moon.
Although, I personally think that most people who engage in a ridiculous amount, an unhealthy amount of alternate history research are mainly doing so because they are unsatisfied with the current course of history, not necessarily because they are particularly fascinated.
Oh no, I think it's purely academic. He's not in a role that challenges him anymore. He is kind of on the sidelines. What do you do once you're old? You've retired from politics, and you're kind of trying to stay relevant.
Well, the greatest love of politics is philosophy, but then philosophy is the mother of history. So it's a logical jump.
Question.
Did we just all agree that Newt Gingrich is a logical person?
I would be...
Flashback to colonize moon. For those of you watching at home, that's 1 minute back.
Well, I guess that's a perfect segue. So if you're joining us currently in the moment, you either waited for us to sit there and eat and talk about Newt Gingrich colonizing the moon, or you skipped to this part in the video where we're discussing the actual topic of today's Friday Forum.
Which is
cultural relativism, exactly.
Okay,
So,
I'll go
dive
first.
into it.
I will point out that this is water, and he is just acting drunk.
How dare you, sir? Demand a duel. Okay, let's go with cultural. Hold on, sir. I'm unarmed. I'm white. I'm okay.
Let us be civilized. We shall go and retire so we may pipe in the other room.
We're civilized.
Anyway, go for it. Go ahead.
Okay, let's go for this viewpoint of cultural relativism. The stupidity of it that we shouldn't judge other people's culture because our culture is somehow bad in some other level.
I don't even know if it's just necessarily that the argument is that it's bad. It's that cultures, regardless of accomplishment or skill, are equal. Which what cultural relativism is.
Which I beg to differ because one reason. Well. You see, if I'm a gay person in Saudi Arabia, I will probably get thrown out of the tallest skyscraper, tallest building, and if I somehow survive that by whatever freak of nature, they stone me to death.
Unless you're the Sultanate's secret butt buddy.
Or that. But if I'm a gay person...
Or a child.
But if I'm a gay...
It took me a second, and then I was like, wait, no!
Yeah, that, sadly, Afghanistan's very responsible with that.
Well, Afghanistan does rank #1 on internet use for visiting sites that post material.
Then again, didn't Afghanistan pretty much...
Cultural relativism, gentlemen.
Okay.
Culture. It's their culture. You can't call it wrong.
I think we can't really discuss. So, instead of... last week we discussed the origins of why Western universities were collapsing. I think it would be better if we took the opposite approach this week, and instead discussed the end result of cultural relativism, which for me is no more firmly manifested than in the collapse of the European Union. That to me is the greatest example currently available in a contemporary setting of what happens when you take cultural relativism to the extreme. Would anybody like to reject that idea or elaborate on it?
To be more elaborate, it's not collapsed yet, it's collapsing. I'll be honest, I used to be a firm believer of the European Union, the idea of New Rome. Then I realized Angela Merkel is taking over and she wants to make
It's not even Angela Merkel. Germany, all of the political power is very firmly rested in Belgium, in the European Union. At least all the real political power of the European Union.
Belgium does not exist, sir. It's not a country. It's just a freak of accident that England wanted to colonize and decided, you know what, never mind.
But you really can't ignore that Belgium is destroying Western civilization.
Well, of course, to Belgium. Have you seen their actions in Rwanda? The side aspects in Rwanda when they had to take care of that little tiny colony. A genocide happened after they left.
Right. You look like you had something to say, Percival.
Oh, no.
Are you sure?
Are you sure?
Of course I'm sure. If I were to critique one culture because they simply hold beliefs that I don't, and that seem to contradict human nature and the human condition and personal... Oh, well, who am I kidding? Of course I agree that this is a serious issue. I do not believe that the EU is a good example.
Of course.
Of cultural relativism?
Solely because the EU...
Would anyone else like any water?
The EU, in my view, is failing largely due to economic sanctions and economic reasons.
You can't deny though that the already slow death of the European Union has only been exacerbated by their politically correct, introduction of incompatible cultures into their societies.
And this is the climate change debate. Are humans responsible for speeding it up significantly? And is it always warming? Is it cooling? I mean, we have that guy from the House of Lords in England. I mean, obviously, done the research. One of the foremost experts says it's cooling right now. No temperature change globally overall in 18 years.
We and I could
so where do we get how do we get there from cultural relativism?
Exactly.
The reason we're there from cultural relativism is because you're saying the EU's deterioration has been sped up by allowing other cultures to manifest themselves.
I've-
And I'm
It's not,
saying...
it's not even necessarily letting other cultures manifest themselves. It's granting special privileges to those cultures and allowing them to exist extra legally outside of their own judicial system.
Don't forget one major thing. Every time there's, I don't know, something like Nice, Paris, Charlie Hebdo, the clone rape, mass rape case.
I mean, we just had
Sweden,
we just had Tommy Robinson, thrown in jail for reporting on that trial with the rape circle leaders.
which reminds me towards this thing. This funniest thing.
So he was not arrested for reporting on it?
He was arrested for being politically incorrect.
No, he was arrested for violating parole and filming outside a courthouse where they had not been deemed guilty. So it was viewed as trying to lead the jury and the public to a consensus about the guilt of
Would the jury have had access to him outside? I'm not entirely sure. Does the judicial system in the UK allow for jurors to
view media?
To view media while on trial?
That is uncertain.
I don't
However, there would definitely be a public outcry for sentencing.
And
If you assume people guilty before,
Right.
innocence
deemed
before.
Well, I mean, yeah.
guilty.
But the point is, ever since the establishment of the UK Communications Act in the 70s, we've seen a gradual increase. I mean, originally, it really goes to show you that when you create a law with the expectation that people will be moral enough to navigate the law without specific language, you always risk the possibility that people will eventually interpret that law in far more different terms than what you had originally imagined, because they no longer have a value structure that's compatible with what you were saying. And so it's just really easy to jump between those two things. At least I personally feel like it is.
I do agree postmodernism does contribute towards cultural relativism. And the major problem I have with it is pretty much the viewpoint of immigrating to this country is to mend your culture with this culture, to adapt to this culture. Yet many people say, why should we? Why should we say that our culture is superior than the other culture? We're not saying that our culture is superior to the other culture. We're just saying that they need to adapt to our culture if they want to live here.
Now, I'm not particularly... I don't know if I go as far as to say as that there is necessarily a supreme culture, but I would argue that cultural facets that encourage the liberation of the individual and his ability to freely move, think, and express themselves within society should be celebrated regardless of where it comes from, and things that do not should not be celebrated. For instance, let me give you a very clear-cut example, right? We have Western civilization. We've got socialism, and we've got libertarianism, right?
Mm-hmm.
Both of which come from the West. Now, there's nothing inherent about the fact that they came from the West that makes them good. Socialism is a terrible idea, and it is about as Western as it comes, just from a different ideological tradition within the West. Its collectivist roots. Or not even roots, but there are certain facets within Western culture that purport collectivism. Mostly, I would argue, stemming from misguided interpretations of Christianity. But regardless, that's irrelevant. Doesn't mean it's necessarily better. Doesn't mean that it has anything, that it's necessarily of value. Terrible idea. However, and we could see the same thing in, it's actually kind of hilarious. We could see something similar in India. India has a notoriously collectivist culture, where, so much so that, going outside of your predetermined birth caste is not only a legal offense, at least not, maybe not now, because they've legally abolished the caste system in India, although it still holds heavy cultural sway there. So it's like, going outside of your caste in Hinduism is not just a legal offense, but it is a moral offense. It is damaging not only to your secular reputation and your secular holdings, but also your spiritual well-being. But let's take a facet of Indian culture that is surprisingly individualistic. Buddhism it's actually kind of interesting. So Buddhism seeks to bring about collectivist identity through individual self-progression, which is interesting because it's a bottom-up, which I am always more willing to celebrate than a top-down. Almost always. I do not like top-down ideologies.
Almost always. Until, I want to say 2 minutes ago, your entire argument for the collapse of all of Western civilization, of the EU, of everything, has been Aristotle, who was the bottom-up counter to Plato's top-down counter. Furthermore, I was going to agree entirely that Aristotle's viewpoints were going to be one of the leading contributors to this cultural relativism. For the sole purpose that it is generally cited as one of the things that has brought about what most philosophers would call Occam's razor and a view on ontology. So what should we believe in? How many things should we believe in? And then, of course, your deconstructionism, all of these things that you're just like people can discredit. The entire premise for doing so is I don't have the foundation for, having these beliefs, so should I believe in them? Should I not? Should I consider them as equal?
I don't think it's necessarily incompatible. You can... So here's the thing, right? Now, obviously, if we look at things as a duality, where there is only top-down or bottom-up, obviously that would be hard to rectify in this particular situation. But within the ambiguities of philosophical thought throughout human history, depending on where you're looking at, when you're looking at, it is easy to make a statement in which you can, from the bottom up, discover the top down. So you can use the bottom up as a method to discover the top down easily. You can say, well, I'm starting from the bottom up. I, as an individual, am taking responsibility for my own self-education, for my own personal progression, and I, as an individual, am responsible for the entire way reality around me operates based on my choices and how I react to certain stimuli that I encounter in the world. That is a very good definition of bottom up. However, there's also the notion that humanity builds on itself for a reason. And the reason is because when you've had your ancestors, or when you've had the forerunners to a culture, provide the excellent craftsmanship or literary prowess that they have through hundreds, if not thousands of years of work, then that carries down to the next generation in the form of top-down, through tradition. Now, there's no reason why you can't assert that you as an individual in a postmodern society where nothing is really held sacredly, you can, as an individual, use that bottom-up method to grow yourself to the point where you acknowledge not only the validity but also the importance and sacredity of the top-down methods as a rediscovery. And in fact, you could argue that it is the bottom-up methods of the pre-Enlightenment that see the resurgence of top-down philosophy and ideology that re-emerges during the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment, sure, begins with everyone questioning everything and trying to rediscover the idea of science, philosophy, rhetoric, debate outside of a religious Christian, worldview, out of that frame. But once they get to a certain point in the Enlightenment and they rediscover the classical works, it all comes full circle again and it becomes top-down. It's, well, we started bottom-up, looking for ways to improve our civilization, and we discovered that older civilizations had better methods that worked better and provided better individuals, thus the top-down. So while I can understand that maybe within the context of a duality where you either have to believe in bottom-up or top-down, what I was talking about wasn't necessarily the infinite righteousness or validity of Buddhism, but necessarily, but that the idea of the individual as a personage discovering or searching after truth, things like the Eightfold Path, can allow you a gate to discovering top-down ideologies from previous times, different cultures, things like that. And you take from it what you will. And, obviously it is up to your own critical thinking and your own personal, critical reasoning to determine exactly what it is that you're going to keep and what it is that you're going to throw away.
And at that point, the Occam's razor is still there, and you have the problem with the metaphysical, because you're going to be questioning whether or not what you arrive at as a conclusion is the same as another conclusion.
Back to cultural relativism. So let's say that the idea of cultural relativism, right, that no culture is any better than any other culture.
Okay.
Let's say that idea was valid, unequivocally, and that you could prove it objectively.
Okay.
Right? Let's say that were true, right? What would be the benefit of adopting that ideology? It seems to me
chaos in society.
exactly. So here's the thing, right? Accepting something, even if it's true, does not always guarantee that that thing will benefit you. Now, and again,
but that's a false
equivocation.
In that, we don't know that that's true. Everything we know is true is not a bad thing to accept. You have to go and invent things to be true or suppose that they are in order to get that contradiction.
All I'm saying, right? But all I'm saying is that it's better for you, like, obviously before, like,
wait. Or we can argue Islam for this.
Okay.
Oh, goody! Yay!
So the doctrine of Islam is not based on anything in this world. So if you accept Islamic text, what is good is as it is defined in Islamic text. So slavery is good. Having sex slaves is good. The best way to fund your country and your caliphate is by waging war. that is a...
Don't forget apostasy, my friend. Don't forget apostasy.
So these premises can be demonstrably proved as falsities in terms of economic standpoints, in that every capitalist society in the world is richer than any Muslim conquest could ever get by just taking what already exists.
Right, because you're creating new capital instead of just seizing other people's.
Exactly.
You mean seizing the means of production?
And we can see that for the majority of people, that is, if there is more than one slave per person, as was usually the case, then we see the majority of people benefit from having rights and freedom. So these contradictions you have to accept as true.
All I was trying to say
are outside of the same framework.
All I was trying to say is that if an idea benefits society and increases standards of living and intellectuality, then it is self-evident that that thing is good, even if it is not perfect. Now, what I mean by that, right, and I'm trying to be as specific as I can, because I am talking in esoteric abstractions.
Well, are you also talking about compelling anything?
Well, what I'm trying to...
Because what you're trying to compel is that people are all more academically inclined, and they should be involved more in the thought process.
Sadly, that's not the case.
Sadly, not everyone is academically inclined.
Right.
There are many people who cannot even function at a basic level.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to say, right, and I know I've said that 1,000 times already.
What you're trying to say?
What I'm trying to say is that if you believe in something, if you believe enough, no, not at all. What I'm saying is that if you believe something to be true that has a adverse effect on society, it is not worth holding that thing in esteem, period. So, and again, it's hard to discuss these things logically because we're discussing illogical arguments. I'm trying to approach the irrationality of the modern left from a logical lens in which I am, I could just say, let's be real here for a second, right? I could just say, you're insane. You're insane and nothing you believe in makes sense and it's all fake, right? And it's all false. And self-evidently, by the history of your own ideology, it has been proven thus. It is fake, it is wrong, it kills hundreds of millions of people, and it leads to the downfall of Western civilization. Now, I could say that, and it would all be true, right? But that's not good enough. That's not good enough for most people, right? So I'm trying to approach it esoterically by acknowledging at least a partial validity of their argument in an attempt to try to convince them that what they are doing is morally wrong. Which I'm not even totally sure if that's the right way to go about it. But what I do know is that if you cannot use rationalism, if you cannot use logic, if you cannot use scientific analysis to convince these people that their beliefs are false and are hurtful, then there has to be some other way for you to address these issues. And engaging in some of the idiosyncrasies of what these people are doing, maybe. Now, obviously with you gentlemen, I can have a logical, rational, informed discussion in a civil manner, and I can say, hey, look at this data point. And you're like, oh, That is a data point. That suggests your point. And there's quite a bit of data behind that to justify that. However, that's not the way these people operate. They operate on feeling and emotion and, like, the spur of the moment.
You can't quantify those. It's the entire problem that hedonism's always had.
Exactly. And so, what I'm trying to do, not exactly, successfully, I might add, but what that I have been trying to do, because, I mean, obviously at this point, as much as I want it to be so, I don't think that most of America cares enough to undergo a legitimate political restructuring that would account for these inconsistencies and horrors. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to step over the line to try to get these people to understand what I'm saying in a language that they can understand, even if to rational people that language is gibberish. Now, I'm not saying that it's right. In fact, I wish I didn't have to do it at all, right? But as a student in a university and as a teacher in a classroom, oftentimes I find that the pure, unadulterated logic and rhetoric that is so useful and so good for proving points and, sorting out fallacies just simply does not work as an argumentative tool for these people. And in the case where you cannot argue with someone rationally, you're only really left with two things. One, kill them, or two, try to use their own language to get them to understand what it is that you're saying.
Or agree to disagree.
But you can't agree to disagree and have a coherent society.
Sure you can.
Yeah,
not if they use their political power to enforce their ideals, which then further collapse the society. Because it'd be one thing if these people said, "I believe in this completely nonsensical thing," and then went about their lives only affecting themselves with their terrible decisions and their terrible ideologies.
Welcome to the Flat Earth movement.
But that's right. Well, but the Flat Earth movement isn't, like, obviously it's zealous. It's not that somebody would even suggest that the Earth is flat. But at least the Flat Earth movement is not hurting anyone. It's making people more stupid. However, I wouldn't say that there is a tremendous amount of Flat Earth activists out there actively working to destroy society and make it a worse place. Whereas you do see...
What about these evil corporations like Tide, making Tide Pods for their sole purpose?
But the Tide Pod Challenge, I mean, think about the children who even though it says you're not supposed to swallow them in the Tide Pod thing,
right,
still swallows them.
Oh, but they look so shiny and delicious.
I mean,
So it's the rational approach then.
The thing with rationality is this: it works with people with not only common sense but think about things.
What do you do? What do you do with the people who cannot argue in these ways?
Market.
You have to market them. You have to appeal to emotions. Sadly, you have to. Let's view it more like this: many of these.
But sometimes using because emotion can be logical. You can appeal to emotions in a way that is both positive and objectively true. You can say, hey, you should like capitalism, because if you like children and you don't like children starving to death, statistically and historically, capitalism has been the best vehicle for them to not starve to death. But even though you've used emotion and rationality to appeal to their sentiments, they are still going to reject you out of hand, because you are presenting to them a field of thought that they are not acceptable.
We don't have to worry about timing, because...
that they have found that they do not find acceptable, right? In which case, again, give me another. Like, you can appeal to their emotions, but if you appeal to them in a way that they do not understand or are unwilling to understand, then you are still left with the problem. Maybe a large percentage of the population that is actively destroying its society, even if it doesn't mean to.
What you need to do is to pretty much do the other shock of it. Many of the reasons why many of these people don't like capitalism is because they will look at a homeless guy and feel bad for them and say, how can this guy suffer? How is he suffering in this system that's supposed to be perfect for all of us? Then they go to this viewpoint of communism or socialism where it's supposed to benefit for all of us.
I think you actually just solved it in the first two sentences of your argument. It is because they expect the solution to be utopic in nature that they are unwilling to acknowledge incomplete and, capitalism is not perfect. obviously there are things within capitalism that create, and here's the thing, right? Maybe, right? And capitalism is not perfect for the very same reason that human beings are not perfect. And because human beings are not perfect, there will always be instances where things are used in exploitative means, and people will be taken advantage of. However, that's not good enough for people who believe in the idea of the perfect utopia, right? Even a perfect utopia that is false and destructive sounds better to people who want to believe in this idea of the perfect society than a perfectly functioning system where 95% of us, as long as you aren't screwing around too much, are going to benefit from the system.
Exactly.
That's not good enough for them.
The reason why it's not good enough for them, and the main reason when you try to bring up the atrocities done by the Soviet Union and China, pretty much Pol Pot, Khmer Rouge, Venezuela's failing, all that stuff, they will say this, but it's not real communism. What they really mean is this: if I'm in charge of this system, it would have been perfect.
So it's greed. It's,
It's misplaced moral supremacy.
It's misplaced narcissism. It's narcissism in a more relevant thing.
There's a reason that the academics all believe that they would fare well in socialism. They envision themselves in the government.
The problem with that, with these academics, is if they ever even open up a book, is whenever a new system, whenever the revolution comes to place, it eats its own. It gets rid of the old guards, the intellectuals, and makes new for fanatical new followers.
Of course.
The major...
Because they would never agree with how anyone else wanted to implement it.
But
they also don't understand the keys to power. It's like, yeah, you were fine when you were part of, the mob that helped run down the government, but now that I have to consolidate the keys to power, it's like, look, if I'm going to run a communist dictatorship, I should only have 10 of you.
Exactly.
I only need 10 of you. I need 2 of you to be accountants, 2 of you to be in charge of the military, one of them also in charge of the militaristic police force. I need you to be in charge of trade. I need you to manage the country's finances.
And it's another thing, the idea of history.
The more keys to power you have, the harder it is to maintain a dictatorship.
One major thing is the idea of the keys to history, or writing your own history. The idea of revisionism. If we have a lot of intellectuals, some of them will disagree of what this strongman says. If you could get rid of most of them and make the others submit to your point of view, they will, by force, will pretty much try to re-envision this history, saying that the old way was bad, horrible, the new way is better, you should be thankful. Think about it like, 1984's Ingsoc. The party makes reality, facts are not reality.
In which case, I will cite 2 references here. The first being the New Atlantis, which is the idea that you can basically... it's by Sir Francis Bacon, if the people at home would like to read it. It can be read in 2 ways. It can be read as a religious book, to where you have actual comings of, a messiah figure who comes, brings people knowledge, and because they have first-hand knowledge of it, they behave. Or you can read it as intellectuals taking control of society by creating a large consensus for their point of view. And then the second work is really just a reference back to the days of Aristotle, when you had the Greek notion of eudaimonia, or the prolonged state of just being okay. So, everything's okay, it's peaceful, you're happy this whole time. It's a prolonged bliss. It was their version of utopia while they were alive, and so trying to make most people not sad, or not deprived of something they need, seems to be a Greek problem, and if that is the root of the cultural relativism, because different people benefit in different ways, then we have the entire problem solved by saying...
drugs.
Greeks. The Greeks invent both these systems for these last 2 weeks. The Greeks have also spelled the end for both of them.
Well, it's kind
So
of...
it has begun, so it shall end, huh?
It's
Yes.
quite poetic. It's with Greece that we start with Western civilization, and it's with Greece that we will pretty much end Western civilization. Great.
Well.
Okay, so I discovered a way that we could fix this. We nuke Greece.
No.
We nuke Greece. If we nuke Greece, how can Greece end civilization?
I'm pretty sure it's just rebellion. I'm pretty sure, since this is basically Aristotle versus Plato played out over thousands of years as opposed to 20.
I mean, everyone knows that Plato is better than Aristotle.
Yeah,
Oh, of course.
Of course. I mean,
Philosopher kings? Yes, please.
Wow.
but
Also, ideal forms.
then,
Well, definitely
I do like the form of the ideal.
though, there's one thing that
I'll let you finish up Galahad, and then we'll go ahead and we'll say goodbye for this week, guys. What are your final thoughts on it, Galahad? Take us out.
Cultural relativism. We do not need it. We should not embrace it. And for the love of God, if we want to improve our civilization, to improve society as a whole, what we do is we take the good things from individualism from each culture and try to inherit towards our thing, to integrate it. That's how the idea of the American dream, that's how the idea of the American way is made, through the melting pot. I might be an old believer, but I believe that old ideal still holds true in my heart.
Well, you heard it here. Although I definitely believe in the idea of the mosaic rather than the melting pot. The idea that you bring your culture with you, but that you not only but that you contribute something of yourself, not just assimilating it. But
Well, I mean, you must assimilate if you're going to become part of the Messiah.
Then,
You must be glass.
Then again, I'm a bit more.
Exactly.
Then again, I'm a bit more lefty than most of you.
right? Oh, you lefty? Aren't you like? Oh, no, never mind. Anyway, well, thank you guys for joining this week again. We apologize for the technical difficulties again this week. We're still trying to figure out our whole camera situation. Thank you so very much for joining us again. We'll see you next week. This has been New Rome, signing out.